think sometimes elite athletes don't appreciate coaching where they're at. And all coaches, we got so much time in meets to just sit around and complain and guess and hypothesize what everybody else has and what you don't have. And I think that's might be one of my best attributes is I don't spend any time thinking about that at all. I like to steal things if they have it and ask, but if we don't have it, saying something's a death sentence or something else is, that's just a terrible thing to do for the kids in general. They'll pick up on that, they'll feed off it, we want to try to provide everything except an excuse is my goal, I guess, as head coach.
That was Coach Robert Gary today on the Running Effect podcast. Today's conversation is a really fun one because I get to kill two birds with one stone, talking with an Olympian who is also a top NCAA coach. Coach Gary has got it done at every single level, and he is an incredibly wise and kind individual. I loved my conversation with him today. I was honored that he's the first coach I get to speak to this year. If you've followed the sport for any extended period number of time, I'm sure you've heard his name. He's the current head coach at Furman, and he's had great success there, turning that program around. Before that time, he coached at the Ohio State University, where he allowed them to have the success that they hadn't experienced in quite some time. And before that, he was an athlete himself at the Ohio State University as well. Today's conversation, we sit down, we break down his principles of coaching, how you can transform your running this year, and stories from his athletes, from his individual career, different Columbus things, as we both spent significant time in that city, and a lot of other things. This was a really enjoyable conversation. I'll keep this intro short so you can enjoy and experience the full Coach Robert Gary experience and wisdom. If you enjoy this one, hit the follow button so you don't miss another conversation like this year. Give us a 5-star review, takes next to no time. And make sure you share the podcast with a friend who you think would find value and benefit from it. That is the easiest way in which we can grow and expand and have the impact that I ultimately want to have. Without further ado, enjoy my conversation with one of the legends in the sport, Coach Robert Gary. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sat across from an absolute legend, an Olympian, a respected coach. I've had some of his athletes on. Coach Gary, you know this. If anytime you sit across from Colin Eckerman, he'll talk your ear off. So I've heard all about you, all the positive things, and it's a privilege and pleasure to welcome you on. You're the first coach in 2026. So how you doing, man? Appreciate you.
Doing great. Yeah, back from a break in Chicago, and we still got another week till our team comes back. So enjoying the last part of this break.
Let's talk. I know he'll listen to this, so it's okay if we give him some shit. Colin Eckerman, let's talk about the kid. Have you ever met someone who's so invested in their gym routine as much as Colin Eckerman?
I would say I have never seen someone so invested in any piece of minutia, even indirectly related to running, and a lot of strong opinions. In fact, I am a little upset because I have 5 days more off from Colin Eckerman, and now somehow I'm talking about him. But it's also nice too. The flip side is you're trying to kick a guy in the butt all the time. You hear that expression all the time. He is someone who needs to be held back, chained to a fence, et cetera, but just wants to be good. And, really came on so late in his high school career. It's pretty impressive.
I love you, Colin. If you're listening, no hate. I'll give him his flowers. I think he's a guy that I met. He's senior year of high school, I believe his senior year. And he kind of has this transformational, makes the dream of making Foot Locker back when it was Foot Locker. They changed it, 8 times in the last 5 years. And then he goes on, makes the Brooks PR meet, has a really good closing to his high school career. And that guy, I got to see at those meets, his dedication to the sport, his craft to the sport. He had a swagger about him where he cared in a good way about his results more than most people. The Stanford recruits, the Notre Dame recruits, the, whatever big school. What was it like for you in the recruiting process to kind of come up with a hidden gem of oh, wow, this kid has some real discipline that I'm not used to seeing in the recruitment process?
I think one of the most underrated things, especially nowadays, because high schoolers can hit it so hard so quickly, is seeing someone who's on, some kind of upward trajectory. And so Colin really was a late bloomer. I want to say as late as his junior year, he still maybe hadn't broken 9:30, or it might have been his sophomore year, but just to see him kind of running. And I've been kind of kept apprised. Tony Cozy was a athlete that I ran against. He was at Tennessee, and he was keeping me updated on him. And at first I was kind of like, hey, rolling my eyes a little bit, but, kind of alongside Tony and seeing him as he was building through all these seasons and kind of going forward. But, the one nice thing when you meet Colin too, his enthusiasm is certainly infectious. I've never met someone who can, pick out a side of an argument and battle it to the death instantaneously. But I enjoy, passionate people like that pick a side and want to get going. It's not to say we haven't butted heads every couple times, but it was really exciting to see him kind of go forward and get going and make such a big jump. Not just once, but I mean, some serious consistency. I could tell, by the end of his senior year, he had done everything. I mean, he wanted to sign up for every single race, and every single race is sub 4, sub 8:45. I mean, there were no easy races, and that's something I've come to learn about, Colin as well. So I think the college scene every 2 weeks might be a little bit better for him, but keeping him on the rails for 14 days straight is sometimes difficult. So.
A lot of young athletes listening to this podcast who have those aspirations of going D1 one day. What are some of the traits? I mean, you spoke to some of them with Colin, but outside of Colin for a second, like what are some of the traits you're looking for in athletes, whether they're a freshman, junior, outside of time, some of those qualities you're looking for in athletes that you recruit?
There's probably not, I mean, a couple of things. There's probably not a bigger word that we talk about than enthusiasm. I think anytime, you want to achieve anything great, although that's a Ralph Emerson quote, not a Coach Gary quote, but, enthusiasm can really get you a long way. And especially nowadays, I think one of the tough challenges that kids have is very, very, very few freshmen that can come right in and really hit it. I know the stats are always pretty staggering. One or two true freshmen are All-Americans. Takes a year. It used to be, it was always tough. I was someone who almost led the country and came in and had a tough time with the transition kind of in or whatever. And that was tough. But nowadays, you almost have to give it a year. You almost have to give it 2, if not 3 years. You almost got to live like a semi-professional athlete. If you really do want to get to the top of the NCAA, I think of things even like I was around before we had the regional qualifying times. And at least those used to be, I don't want to say low hanging fruit, but a little bit more attainable. Now, you got to run a 3:58 mile, equivalent to get a regional mark, or 13:50. I mean, a lot of these times just 10 years ago were considerably slower. The regional times, basically now are the old NCAA times as recently as 6 or 7 years ago. So you can see the wind coming out of some of those kids' sails, and they might become a little bit upset. They might end up pushing a little bit too hard. And more often than not, they also don't have a lot of things to cheer about. That's probably the biggest thing that we've kind of talked about over the last year in our program. After we had some pretty heavy hitters leave, and Dylan Schubert and Carson Williams, it's just, hey, these are still PRs, and sometimes they just need to kind of reach for a ladder rung that isn't, 100 miles over their head. And that's a tough thing for any athlete. Nothing motivates like success, but, with everything that runners kind of give up, and time and energies, and, partying, and, anything, even grades, a job, everything else, and if you don't get that exact return on investment, and a pretty big one too, it can be discouraging. So I think keeping people, in some realistic expectations, I think is really good, and really imperative nowadays in coaching. So.
Let's talk about kind of the brand of Furman. Before we started recording, we were talking a lot about Ohio State. As you know, a lot of others know, I live in Columbus, big Ohio State Buckeye fan. And obviously, I was sharing with you kind of the brand of Ohio State, how back in the day when you were the head coach, you'd call kids and there was an immediate allure to the school. I think Furman is a school where I'll be fully transparent with you. I couldn't even tell you the city that you guys are based out of. I think you're in South Carolina, if I had to guess. I'm sure you get that experience with a lot of other recruits where it's like, hey, I know you're D1, and maybe I saw a guy, Dylan Schubert, place well, but who are you? What are you guys about? What's the school? So what's that process like when you're trying to sell a recruit on the pitch of Furman and the culture versus the Stanford or the CU Boulder or the schools that, they immediately can picture Boulder and the OAC, on the trails? What's the Furman distinguishing marker, would you say?
Well, I think a lot of programs have positives and negatives, and, mine have kind of been inverted upside down, sideways, from having been to Ohio State to coming to Furman. Lots of the positives of there are some, struggles that we have, kind of here at Furman, but we do have a good kind of wave behind us. Certainly the first year or two, I mean, we were we were talking really, really quick on that first call to try to not get shut down. I think the one nice thing is, we'll go and we always have gone and tried to recruit the best kids in the entire country. I think a lot of times I think of a school like Oklahoma State, and they didn't really take off until they got German Fernandez. And I know some people, whether it's a lot of foreign athletes or whatever, but until you get the biggest stud in the country, I think there is a little bit of limit over your head. But the same at Ohio State. I talked to you before when I was on the team. We were last every year. We had some great distance runners, but only one at a time because a lot of times there was one scholarship at a time. So one of the things that we do at Furman, I think, is we really try to bundle, kids together, kids that know that they're coming in together. I think, this might be the third or fourth year that I think we probably have a top, 6 or 7 recruiting class, taking out, maybe some foreign athletes, if just looking at high schoolers and, that kind of bundling. So I think we do provide kind of a unique segment there. I think it's a good school. I think it's a beautiful school. I think it's a safe school. I think probably the biggest thing we have to offer is we're just distance only. And I know a lot of schools say that, but we really stay pretty true to that. We have 4 full-time distance coaches, and all of us have taken teams to the NCAA championships on their own. So some of that individual attention, and even at Ohio State, I could have had a team with 200 kids, but we kept a very, very small team. In fact, one of my favorite years of coaching is we had 6 kids on the roster, and we got 14th at the NCAA meet. I like the idea of no place to hide or anything else, and I think that's probably a big part. I think some of these brand schools, Power 5, they might be coming for the football, Saturdays. A variety of reasons. I think if you're coming to Furman, running is a huge, huge priority. It may not be the number one thing, but there is an automatic selection process. I think a scholarship, how much it costs to go here is sometimes a pretty big jump for us. You do have to go to class every day. Some of the things that are negatives might have turned into positives since school started getting so expensive and everything else. But I think that individualized attention, enthusiasm, and kind of that no ceiling over your head. I know that our team doesn't make it every single year to the national meet. We're more like 2 out of every 3 years, but we got a pretty active streak going. I think this was now our 10th or 11th or 12th year in a row that we have at least an individual at the NCAA championships, and we couldn't find more than 10 schools in the country that could say that. So if we don't have a team, a lot of times we at least have an individual, and all Americans, people at the indoor meet, the outdoor meets, just maybe a little bit of smaller scale down. But I think as far as development goes, that's probably the biggest thing. I think that's why I do very little recruiting. I don't think I'm a terrific recruiter. I like being in person a lot more than talking on the phone. So a lot of kudos to Coach Chris Neal, who's now at Notre Dame, for kind of jumpstarting the program, and Coach Roberts and my wife and other assistants for continuing it now. But the development part is really big to me. We just got done talking about it's tough to keep kids invested, interested, and getting better every single year is a very, very real goal that we have. And we have great data, I think, to show it. It may not be always in the biggest leaps, but I think getting off on that trajectory and then hitting these inflections of, all right, now all of a sudden this person jumped up and hit a hard one. Our 2 guys last year, great examples of that, Dylan Schubert and Carson Williams, both, the way they used 5 years to really jump levels, and then really bang it out their 5th year. I think that's probably what a little bit more used to doing. And without having a bunch of older, foreign athletes or some, we do want to try to keep it as much high school as possible, growing together as much as possible. Those are the people whose weddings I'm still going to, or those kinds of things. And those are the things that I love the most about, traveling around with a group of guys that you've been friends with for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And, we'll bring in the occasional grad transfer. We were yet to have more than one at a time. And I think on the women's side, we only have one so far. So that's probably the other niche that we carved out, is just really concentrating on the high school scene.
My team put together some numbers about you, and some of these are hard to believe. So maybe they're off. I don't know. I don't think they are, knowing how long you've been in the sport. But 8 USATF champions, 12 World Championship track team members, 11 World Championship cross country team members, 17 U.S. Olympic trial finalists, 19 sub-4 milers, 63 All-Americans cross country and track and field, 15 NCAA championship team appearances, 19 freshman runners of the year, the IAAF Olympic standard achievers from the 1500 to the 10K, both men and women. One of only 3 American coaches to coach 3 sub 820 steeplechasers, 3 sub 335 1500 meter runners, and 8 sub 339 1500 meter runners. you're consistent across the board, regardless of the distance, regardless of the event, regardless of the sport, whether it's cross country, indoor track, outdoor track. What makes you so successful and so consistent at coaching, regardless of the task at hand?
Well, to be honest, I don't know if all those numbers are 100%. I hope so, or wherever you got them. But yeah, and like you said, I have been coaching for a long time. I mean, I made the Olympic team in '96 and started coaching at Ohio State that fall. So some of that's just being around a lot of people. But like I said, I think we're good at challenging people. I think I've never had a coach that I've loved that also didn't challenge. It's not to say that every coach I've had has been a drill sergeant, general either, but it was never without really making sure that we had goals. And especially in a sport like track, I mean, I think that's why most of us are drawn to it. I think there comes a time where you're not going to get cheated because of a referee call or sometimes even a group of teammates or something. It is what it is. And I like the finality of that. We had a little PowerPoint on the way home before we sent kids home. And the longtime women's coach at Tennessee, the basketball coach, I forget her name. Anyway, she had a great quote, and it said, life, it gives you vision, but you got to be willing to keep score. And I like the idea of keeping score on things. I know that there's a lot of buzzwords, particularly maybe from younger coaches, things like gratitude and, I guess just doing your best. But I like putting pressure on kids. I like listening to what their goals are and trying to hold them accountable for it. And kind of not being afraid to keep scores, nothing personal about that. There's nothing attacking. It's simply figuring out, what's the next way to go. I think that's what we do with kids when they got 3, 4, or 5 years with us, a long period of time. We try to add to their toolbox of positives and, take away the stuff that didn't work. And I think individualizing training is how I've always been brought up. I was one of those guys. I mean, I made a bunch of world cross country teams, and I don't think I've ever run more than 80 miles a week, which I know is still kind of a lot, but I'm probably on the lesser side. And took me a long time to run more than 60 miles a week. But keep in mind, in high school, I never ran more than 4 miles in one stretch. So I guess I'm one of those athletes. I've been successful enough, but I think I probably remember a lot of the times that I fell apart. The truth is, I should have made the Olympic team in 2000. That was the year that I really should have made it. And I can say that, hey, nerves really got to me. That's the only explanation. I ran 8:24 in the heats, won my heat, and was jogging, felt great. And it was the first time I was at Olympic trials where I wasn't a big long shot. And sometimes it's nice to be a long shot, when you got pressure on you or whatever. So different times in my life of things that go, I probably draw down a little bit more of the things that were pitfalls for me instead of just dropping on people that, I made the Olympic team one time or I did this one time. I remember a lot of struggles. Cross country was a huge hurdle for me. In fact, in our house, I think there'd be very few. You couldn't really tell that I had ever been an athlete except my All-American cross country certificate, even though I finished 25th and, I was the only one there. That's one of my most coveted things. I mean, to finally figure out cross country from where I was, I think I was 98th at the Big Ten meet my freshman year. And that to me is one of the proudest athletic moments I've ever had. So, I think some of those times are, it's all great, but had some really phenomenal athletes. Some of those times are from people I brought down from Ohio State. We talked about, I think you had mentioned Corey Leslie a second ago. I was just texting with him today. Phenomenal athlete. Got the chance to work with him. And, I've always loved the state of Ohio as far as talent goes. I think it's one of the best in the country year in and year out in every single event. I got to be there for 16 years. Furman's kind of nice too, just because when we get kids, we know they're here for, they do want to go to school. They're big time into running. They're not there just to, for the t-shirt or the brand recognition. They really want to see what they can do in running and feel like Furman's the spot. So.
Why, and I know you know this space way better than I do, but from what I know about the sport of coaching and NCAA cross country track and field, it seems like there's not a ton of Olympic athletes who then get into the sport and start coaching. Why do you think that is? And how much pride do you take that you got it done both at the individual athletic level and now are transferring it to getting it done at the coaching level?
Well, I think it was another guy, I think in your who were you talking about? You were having a podcast with someone talking about all the great distance runners, and you somehow forgot Mark Krogan, who was Evan Yeager before Evan Yeager came. But he was a good example of someone who just didn't enjoy coaching, and I think it was tough for him because he just couldn't you just couldn't understand, why you can't hurdle great, why you get nervous before a race, why you can't do this workout or that workout. I think a lot of great athletes kind of, we all have revisionist history to some extent, and they kind of discard some of the times that they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. I'm not so far removed from college, I guess, myself. I am quite, but I certainly remember some of the things that I did in college, and being a little bit more relatable, understanding that kids are going to make mistakes, they're going to do dumb shit. I think that's really, I think it should be obvious, but I think it is tough for some, quote unquote elite athletes, certainly athletes that were a lot better than me, when they were going. I just think it's tough for them to get into it or whatever. And I think I liked piecing it together. The truth is, even though we were at Ohio State, I think our budget was like $10,000. I was working for minimum wage. We had a lot of things, but I liked doing that. I think same thing at Furman. Some of the things that we got to work around, or we don't have outstanding facilities as it pertains to stands and an outdoor track, but we got everything that we need. And I think trying to piece that together is one thing I really enjoy about being a director of a program. The budget stuff, the fundraising, cultivating. We're very fortunate to have some great donors, particularly one really, really good donor that really saw things pretty far out in 2005, started an endowment. So all these changes that are happening in the NCAA, oddly enough, you would think a mid-major would be falling by the wayside, and yet we've only gone up and up and up. With it's operational dollars, but it's also scholarships that have never been taken away from us. Even during COVID, there's some real, I always kind of say we're a small school with big school resources, and that's an incredibly fortunate thing. It's not just the genius of Coach Gary, but it is the understanding and the appreciation of it. I think sometimes elite athletes don't appreciate coaching where they're at, and all coaches, we got so much time at meets to just sit around and complain and guess and hypothesize what everybody else has and what you don't have. And I think that's might be one of my best attributes is I don't spend any time thinking about that at all. I like to steal things if they have it and ask, but if we don't have it, saying something's a death sentence or something else is, that's just a terrible thing to do for the kids in general. They'll pick up on that, they'll feed off it. We want to try to provide everything except an excuse is my goal, I guess, as head coach.
Do you think another reason why we don't see as much athlete to coach turnover, like elite athlete to coach turnover, is because athletes are just burnt out by the time that they're done with the sport, that they want that 9 to 5, or they want kind of some structure or stability. And if you agree with that, if you don't, you push back, please. But if you do, what do you think allowed you to stay in the sport, all these years? The last year you probably weren't running was sometime in middle school, if I had to guess.
Yeah. Well, it was, I think the other thing is I started when I was very young. So you think about someone who goes through and, runs till they're 30, 32 years old. They've missed out on a little bit of what you might think, real life. They haven't had tons of skills. Now, if you're a good enough athlete, I'm sure you're going to catch on. You're going to be able to do something. But for me, my salary grew as I grew in the sport. When I finished running professionally, I kind of put two crappy salaries together for quite some time and was reasonably comfortable. And then, when I stopped running professionally, that's when I got the head job at Ohio State. And so, I never felt like I was running behind. You'd be surprised how many athletes, and there's more now than there used to be, but things like saving for retirement, a lot of those things, people are kind of a little bit behind. Maybe not the very highest levels in our country, but the people that have been kind of gutting it out and grinding through and, living on race winnings, maybe parents are helping them out, those types of things. All these new groups are something that's incredibly new. It's incredible. There's so much, assistance now. It didn't used to be like that. You used to stay with your college coach. If he was willing to take you on, or if he had the expertise to do so, and you gutted it out, so piecing those two things together, I think are really good ones and going. So I was I got to get my first job was at 24 years old, and it was a head coach position at my alma mater, and it being a Power 5 like Ohio State.
How'd you get that, by the way? What'd you say in the boardroom? How'd you get that job, by the way? What did you? What was at such a young age? How did you get such a high title?
Well, you can tell where kind of Ohio State thought about distance running at the time that I did get it. But the big one was I was literally there. I mean, I hate telling this story because there's so many other great stories of people grinding and doing a GA. But I was literally cleaning out my locker, and the head coach at the time, Russ Rogers, wasn't allowed to go on vacation until he hired a cross country coach. And he just asked me if I would do it for the year. And I thought it'd be 1 year. But I just made the Olympic team. And, another thing I'll say probably about my professional running is I probably threw myself into coaching way more than professional running. I wouldn't have survived with the kind of professionalism that people now exhibit, even at the college level, at the pro running. I really taken the Ohio State team, to their first ever NCAA cross country championship as a team. That was one of the best ones. Same with here at Furman. And it's something that I really felt we could do. We did in 3 or 4 years. We did the same thing at Furman. And I really threw myself into that. My running was very, very secondary. And I would show up and have a couple, great performances, but I really got bit by the bug. So I don't want to paint a picture that I was part-time, but there was absolutely no reason for me to get that job when I got it. So.
And you're 24?
I was 23 actually. Yeah.
20.
Yeah.
Wow. So how close were you to that? Like, what did the athletes on the team think about that? How did you recruit kids? Do you feel imposter syndrome when you're going to meets and they're 60-year-olds coaching and you look like you could be on the team?
Yeah. Well, I had some good moments. I think sometimes that's back when people did think I was an athlete. Now they think they don't even believe I'm someone's dad, when I'm going. But I did a lot. I was very getting dressed up for meets. I had a young man on our team tell me that boys are for shorts, so I never wore shorts to the meet. I always wore pants. So I was always dressed. I tried to dress like I was a little bit more professional. It was tough because we had some crossover, and it was only a month previous that lived with some of these guys, and senior housing or whatever. So they saw me go, but they were excited about it. They were older, and like I said, we had such a small team at the time. We never had more than 8, 9, 10 kids on the cross country team, on the men's side in particular, but the women weren't too far off either. So it kind of rolled through pretty quickly. Just sometimes when you get to a program, just some enthusiasm and some energy. I think I had 5 or 6 different distance coaches, including some time where we didn't have some distance coaches at Ohio State. There were times when Mark Krogan would just fill in, but he would just come for 2 hard days. It wasn't like we were bringing recruits in. Lee LeBady at the time, you might know him. He was Murphy's coach, Clayton Murphy's coach, among others, Mark Krogan. But he's the one who recruited me to Ohio State. But he quit after his freshman year, or after my freshman year, first semester. So we were just kind of up and down, and just infusing some energy with some people at Ohio State. Ohio people are so hyped about Ohio State stuff, the vast majority of them, and just showing that kind of enthusiasm, recruiting kids from the state, going to the state meet. It wasn't fish in a barrel, but I really did think I was an awesome recruiter until I left Ohio State. And then I realized that I probably talk a little bit too fast and don't have a good job of kind of getting thoughts a little bit more put together. But always being enthusiastic, always having a vision of where I want our program to be, and always having the belief that we're going to get there. You can get a long way, even in college coaching, with those 3 things.
If were you the youngest to this? You had to be the youngest coach in Power 5 history, right? Youngest head coach. Never heard of a 23.
I don't know that. I do know that when I became the head track coach, when I was over everything, I think I was the second oldest in Big Ten history. Because even then I was 29, 30 years old. I had like 6 or 7 years where I was just the head cross country coach. I don't think people even keep cross country head coaching stats back then. It was definitely a second stepchild to track and field. But and I loved it. And remember, this whole time, this is at my alma mater. Where most people spend their entire careers trying to get back to. I got to start there. So always felt incredibly grateful for that.
In terms of year 1 of coaching versus year whatever you're on now, how different do you coach now, present day, versus year 1 at Ohio State?
Oh my God. There'll be people that probably tune into this. And if it's some of the people that I first started coaching, I lived and died on almost a daily basis. And, the meets were super going. I think now I've learned that you can get there, you can get a kid to do something, and they can borrow your enthusiasm, excitement, and intention, for a period of time. But that does run out of gas until you get that full on buy-in and that partnership and that communication. I think I'm certainly a lot better at that. I think one of the things I complain about now is I feel like in coaching, you got to, there's like a corollary graph of, care and challenge. And if you don't nail it right on the dot, it can cause some real issues. Whereas back in the day or my first year, as long as they knew you cared, and, you were challenging them, you were in business. But now when that comes, what percentages, different kids, different things, you got to care enough about them, that they know it's going to be okay if they don't do it, but you got to care enough that you believe in them enough. I mean, it's really it feels a little pinpointy, and that's a tough thing. I think people always ask me like, how have kids changed? That's one of the few times how I've changed, but I don't feel like kids have changed at all, in that, except for that. I think that, and also knowing where you stand. I think that's another really weird thing, and I think it's from not playing too many sports. I used to be in YMCA sports, so I'd have 2 months where I'd be like a professional floor hockey player because the weather was so bad in Chicago. But I could walk onto floor hockey, and you could say, all right, well, that kid's the worst, that kid's the best, and I land here or there. And that's a very tough skill, I think, for kids nowadays, even in a sport like cross country and track where, it's pretty cut and dry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news sometimes, but some of those things are tough. But I'll always believe, I think it's a Doc Rivers quote, bad athletes want to be left alone. Good athletes want to be coached, and great athletes want to be told the truth. Every great athlete I've ever worked with has been wanted to be told the truth. Circling back to Colin Eckerman, there are times where Colin, he doesn't say that, okay, you're altogether right, often. But I think when I'm dropping some truth on him, I think even Colin can say, all right, and he appreciates it. He'll go back and formulate his article, his argument, and send me a 6-page email, lamenting all the things that I had mentioned. But I think at the end of the day, I think kids want to be told the truth. They don't want to be lied to. They don't want to give, delusion. And, I'm a huge believer in, pressure is a privilege, and I think that's, I would never shortchange a kid like that. And I know times are changing and everybody's worried about, the transfer portal or doing a, Instagram post about, what a devil you are. But, when you coach back on your heels like that, I think you really shortchange the kids that want to be coached for real.
Do you ever think about or lament the fact that you may have had a more successful individual career if you had delayed coaching a little bit? Or are you happy and at peace with how your career individually as an athlete as well as a coach kind of played out?
No, I'm happy. I think, there were times when I left and I came home over the summer and had just spent the year, on the Grand Prix circuit, running this race or that race, or coming back from a global championship saying, man, I got to get a little bit more serious. But as soon as the guys report in cross country, it was hard just not to run with them every day. And building a program, building something that includes just a lot of people. I think that was one reason why I didn't want to quit soccer. I didn't run cross country in high school, and soccer to me was like that. We were doing things for the first time. We went to the state meet for the first time, and I'm a lot older than you. This is back when not every kid walking the earth played soccer. This is when it was this weird little sport, particularly in Chicago, where not everybody played it a lot. And my team going to the state tournament for the first time in school history, making the state finals, will always be far and away the greatest athletic week of my life. And that includes Olympic Games and World Championships and coaching, and some of these coaching things that I've gotten to do. I think it way outweighs it. You got to keep in mind too, I'm part of the era that everybody kind of, laments that it just wasn't that tough. And it wasn't. I mean, I see what kids got to do nowadays, and seeing how great we are in this country and distance running. It wasn't like that when I was running. I mean, a lot of times this weekend I'm mad I don't get to go down to World Championships. I think those guys could meet in a room, and I hope whoever the coach is, even though, I know the coach doesn't play a huge role, but I hope he's at least mentioned the possibility of getting a medal, if not a gold medal, with this 10K team we're putting out there. And those aren't conversations that we had. I went to 11 or 12 world cross titles, and we were there to try to beat, Kazakhstan if they had a bad day or something, countries we didn't, it was just a tough time. So for me, I was still able to be competitive. I still felt like there were some things that wanted to do. I wanted to make another Olympic team though, and that's the only reason I really kept going after 2000. And in 04, that was a proud time of me, just because, when it's your last one, hey, I got to do it now. I was good in those kind of situations, but if I didn't put that kind of pressure on myself, I wasn't fantastic.
As you look ahead to the future, what do you want for this Furman program, and where's your head and mind at with the crazy state of the NCAA, and as you think of the rest of your coaching career and the legacy that you want to leave behind in the sport?
Well, like I said before, I think all programs do have positives and negatives. I know some people. I don't look at people who are getting foreign athletes as any less coaches than I used to think of them. As they're going. I think there's a certain amount of fairness. I don't know how much you follow my wife's social media. I've kind of divorced it to some extent because it's always 110 miles an hour, but I think it's rooted in, I think two basic things I'd like to see is one, some kind of age limit at some point. I do think it's just a profound advantage. And, I'm conscious of, foreign athletes being people too. The idea that you just buy one and all of a sudden they're dope. I know that's not true. I've seen tons of Kenyans run terrible races or get worse or get injured or, anything else. I don't think it's just a buy them and plug them. And I think some people, when there wasn't scholarship money in that area or they weren't the head coach, they weren't controlling it. I've never had any problem with foreign athletes. And I think it could easily be argued right now because I don't really want to hear about shoes. I think the foreign influx has raised everybody's game at the highest level. I just think that second soft pocket, when I hear that 30 or 35 guys were all Americans, I just want those things to be attainable for American distance runners. And if that means they got to work harder, then so be it. And I don't need tons of numbers, but I just don't want to see people kind of, upset. And then the other thing, and it's weird because, as a former professional athlete, I never thought about drugs at all. And maybe that was just my naiveness, or maybe I was that sure that Mark Krogan wasn't on drugs and he was fourth at the World Championship. So it can be done. And I never looked at Mark like he's some kind of Michael Jordan athlete. He's, a 920, 420, kid from Ohio who walked on and earned a scholarship at Ohio State. So it wasn't like he was a freak of nature either, but I felt like it could be done. And that's all I needed to hang my hat on. But some of the hiding from a drug thing, that really is, that's gotten to be something that I would hate. But also it's not really worth crying about because I doubt there's more than 5, maybe 10 people in the entire NCAA. And so to make a big stink about it is crazy. So I had hoped that my wife's kind of legislation that she had through the USTFCCCA would just keep it, hey, you can't turn 26. That seems reasonable to me. And, I love BYU's program. I think they do a tremendous job. I think Ed Eyestone, if he's not the best American distance coach, he's certainly up there. But, if you're Mormon, well, then you get 1 year less. I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, it's just, you make choices in life all the time. Some of our kids go and study abroad. And, it's something to do. I'm not saying it's not important. You just got to, there's enough eligibility, I think, if you only get 3 or 4 years. So I'd like to see kind of that drug thing. As far as Furman goes, I did a great little presentation of saying that, it wasn't that long ago that I want to have years like we had last year, and there's going to be some ebb and flow in our season. We're not always going to be, for sure. But this year, we run just a little bit better at the 2 big invitationals. We were the next team up on the board and we would have made nationals. But the fact is we ran just god awful at the 2 big invitationals, had no points. So we're still a program that can make nationals. We made it just last year. We had a kid who got 3rd at the NCAA meet in the steeple, another one who got 6th. 2 guys went pro. And, I always point to, I hope sometimes Dylan and Carson hear me say this, and I think they take it as some kind of, it's only meant in the most positive compliment way, but they're nothing special on a piece of paper out of high school. Carson ran 9:11 for 2 miles, which I think probably this past year would have put you, I don't know, no way it's in the top 150 in the country. Dylan was 9:17, 9:18, a little bit better, cross country runner. But, and those guys, they came in, they developed, they were coachable. And then I start to go, well, if we had 5 Dylan Schuberts, when the year he got 3rd, we'd have won nationals easily. And I know that's really naive thinking, but those are the kind of people that I want around me. And those are the kind of people that we recruit. And, we got a group of guys that are redshirt freshmen this year that have never run more than 50 miles a week. And these cats think they are winning NCAAs in cross country in 5 years. And you're surrounded by those kinds of people. We're going to make it. I know we're not going to have maybe quite the depth, but I don't care about having the depth. I want everybody in the locker room to be working towards something. So we're set up good, financially, endowment, scholarship, ops. all that stuff is said, I think we got really good coaches. My wife and I want to coach for a little bit longer and lead this program to our assistants. And, I love that stat that we've had someone at the NCAA meet every single year. We start getting into things where only 10 other schools can say that, or, we have this many regional qualifiers. We have a way of kind of catching up on some of the data points at the end. We just don't have a huge school, 2,500 students. It is one of the smallest, but I kind of like seeing it. I'm sure NAU at one point likes seeing their school as the only one out of all these Power Fives, or Iona or Portland. There's lots of schools that are, doing what we're trying to do too. So I still think there's a place. I don't, it maybe have gotten a little bit harder, but we just got to sharpen our skill set, a little bit more so, and probably show a little bit more patience and care and a little bit longer term, looking or whatever. So long answer. Sorry. Yeah.
No, all good substance in there. It's funny. My hat was hung up on Portland. I have not heard that name in years, and they used to be so good.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they're up to these days, but I imagine it's so hard to repeat success cycle after cycle. You get these like what you think are once in a generational athletes. The sport changes every few years, and it's that's why I always have a lot of respect for the programs who get it done every year. The BYUs and NAUs for the longest time that didn't have the craziest budgets or kind of were more grassroots. And I think for a high school recruit, you view it two ways. I think they're the athletes that use their running as a means to get a ridiculously good academic education. I respect that. You have the athletes who go to the schools that placed top 3 at NCAAs the last 2 years. And then you have the athletes that take a chance and want to be a part of something. And that's why I appreciate a kid like Colin. Obviously he didn't have the times to show for it until his senior year, but that's a kid that was mixing it up with the best of the best at the national meets. And when I talked to him anyway, his senior year, he was excited to build something. And I think that culture is contagious. If I was an athlete, I'd love to be in a locker room where you're like, okay, we make the NCAA meet, but we want to win. And here's the blueprint over the next 5 years. And that's exciting to be a part of, rather than this immense pressure of, it's podium or bust for a lot of these big schools. And you're considered a failure if it's anything less.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been times where we've made it, and but our women's team has been 7th. We've had a runner up in the 5K. We've had, Dylan was just 3rd. Last outdoor. I mean, you have enough of those high end. I never want to shortchange the studs or whatever. When we get a kid and they develop even better than maybe they even thought or whatever, that is always, and I think that's kind of, I think we do a good job at Furman doing that, because we're used to working with, professionals, or, for a while we had the Furman elite group here, and we had guys that are trying to make Olympic trials. And so, just having that kind of background and, the steps of going, I think the only time we run into problems when we move someone too quickly. I think when we take our time and we're on the same timeline as the kid, and then all of a sudden you have these inflection, and then all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, let's get going. There's a kid at Ohio State, Ian Connor, he walked onto the program, but somehow made the junior team in the steeple, only running 9:01, but then went to the World Junior Championships, ran 8:38, came back the next year. It's like a different creature, just being exposed to that level, and ended up getting 15th at the NCAA in cross country. And you can just see that those breakout performances are how you go. The steeple was that for me. I ran 9:0. I think I ran 9:02 at Miami of Ohio, a day where we just drove over, ran my first steeplechase in freezing cold. I think they were trying to run me off and wanted my scholarship back, but I didn't know any better. I was like, yeah, let's go. That's how you travel to a meet. And then, ran 9:01, 9:02, terrible conditions. But then 3 weeks later at Mount Sac, I ran 8:36, and it's second fastest time in the country, qualifies you for nationals. This is before regionals. Waiting around for those inflection, performances and seeing a kid get to that level, and then we have this time with them, and I think that's really, really something we're excited about. And having enough people at different pro groups or relationships with agents over the years. I just think I've been coaching for a while, but even some of the Team USA coaching, I'm smart enough to know that I'm not really doing any coaching, but being around those wonderful athletes, seeing how they carry themselves, seeing how their coaches interact with them. I think that constant involvement and sharpening your skills or whatever. I think I pride myself on, you mentioned before how I've changed as a coach. I don't think there's anybody who would recognize what we're doing in training now than what we did 5, 10, 15, 20, certainly not 25 years ago. It's completely different. We change every single year, it's not just fads like double T or something, but it's not just because shoes you can handle a little bit more, but it's, hey, you got to be ready so much earlier. You can't just count on this meet. There's better meets every single weekend being offered. So evolving with it, developing it with it. We got some younger coaches on the team, along with my wife and I. So I think we got good, the bases covered well, I think.
If you could choose, would you rather have Olympic gold individually or an NCAA team cross country championship?
That'd be a team just because there's people.
Yeah.
And that'd be something else too. From Furman. Yeah, that'd be something else. Yeah.
When you think about, longevity in the sport, as you've talked about, you've been in the sport super long. Do you think you'll be one of the kind of Coach Gags figures where, you're just going to always be in it, always be coaching someone, or do you think you're going to hang up the clipboard one of these days shortly?
Well, I feel like I have a lot of energy. I still have some kind of sleep disorder. I don't need more than 3 or 4 hours of sleep. I've always been like that. But no, I think at some point, some kind of travel. I'd be lying if I didn't say that at some point I wouldn't mind getting back into the professional coaching world. We kind of piecemealed it together here with Furman Elite, and the university was very supportive. We had a sponsorship by the end with ASICS, but I think that pro and that lifestyle, but I like the business of being a college coach. I mean, this hasn't been my most workaholic month, certainly, but when we get going, I love traveling on the weekends with the team. I love the hustle. I love the grind. I love all the ups and downs. Even when we don't perform well, I love going back to the drawing board. And, you're constantly, every coach, if they're not, is working on kind of getting resources for their program and going. But I also like creating a vision and kind of staying true to it. The Furman Project, or whatever you want to call it, hasn't changed for 13 years as far as what we feel like we can accomplish, what we feel like we can do. Now, we've needed to bring in more supports to make sure that we're keeping up and stuff like that. But, that kind of getting it together is really fun. It's probably the only thing I miss about being a whole track coach is I liked having a throws coach, and meeting up at the conference meets, sprints, jumps, doing all that stuff together. And, it's a little bit more narrowly focused, but, I think some of that Team USA coaching, scratches that itch or whatever.
You've talked about some of your influences in the sport, as well as some of the people that you've influenced. When you think to the list of coaching tree that you've established, how cool is it to see people like Coach Neal do all the things that he's gone on to do at Notre Dame, or even just who are the people that present day, whether you know or you read, you don't know them, that you look up to in the sport and have found value from?
Well, I love seeing people that have been in our program going, someplace else. Most recent was Nicole Metashik. I mean, she was basically given the women's program at Cal, and she was certainly a special athlete. Probably one of Coach Rita's, favorite. And you could just see her. I don't want to say she made the transition away from running, but you could see that she was asking questions, sitting in occasionally with us, wanting to know what's going on, and just came back from her first convention, USTF CCCA. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's fun seeing someone like that. Chad Ballio, who quit his job, he's an Ohio kid too. He's over at Vanderbilt now, and they're really starting to get their women's distance program to kind of get rolling a little bit. So always seeing that. Corey, Corey's meant to coach. I really believe that he's so good, especially with 2 or 3 or 4 individuals. I know that group doesn't have all the support in the world, but if you look close, he's had a stud a year here, and I mean a real stud on the world level. Just had a kid finish right behind Strand in that 2K. So love seeing kind of what he's doing. But it's also, I'm an incredible product of the coaches that I've benefited from. Starting when I was first introduced to soccer, but just to keep it running, my high school coach, my distance coach, was teammates with Jim Ryan at Kansas. So I got that kind of hit on that kind of training or whatever. Our head coach there was an IU grad, 1964 Olympic silver medalist, hurdler at Ohio State. Russ Rogers was a 400 meter hurdler, ranked number 3 in the world. Mark Krogan. And just dumb luck, happened to be where I lived, happened to be where I picked. I didn't even meet Mark Krogan on my visit, but there's no way that I got into running and certainly got into coaching had I not gone to Ohio State and been around Mark Krogan, type things. So all these people just fan the flame of, coaching or whatever. So I gave a great speech, actually a speech I was very proud of taking the best thing that I took from, I think it was like 8 or 9 coaches growing up, and how you can see them in my own coaching. Even a guy named Coach Murphy, who was a sophomore coach, but he was just a football coach, but ended up being our soccer coach too, because and the way he ran with everything spelled out and written out was very unlike, I think, a lot of cross country and track programs. But you can see where I like to give grids to people and show them this is exactly what I want to do. 2-4 weeks at a time, really getting everything, the specifics down. You can see that in his old school, completely ignorant to, soccer things, but we had practice that was laid out like that. So anyway, just a lot of, coaching, I think, is a profession I think a lot of people apologize for. I certainly don't put it on the level of teachers all the time, but the fact is we're with these kids way more than their parents are sometimes. We get immediate cachet because they're somewhere where they want to be. And I take that, pretty seriously. Even when a kid, messes up and they're in trouble and they come to us to kind of help, I'm proud that, they think to come to us and want our advice on how to deal with something. And sometimes it has nothing to do with running or even being in trouble at that school. It might be relationship or, silly stuff or big stuff. And I think that's something that you got to be open to. But I was like that with all my coaches too. And I didn't mind too when they crawled up in my ass, because I felt like, boy, this guy really believes in me. And sometimes when you don't believe in yourself, you got to borrow some of that, I think. So.
Final serious question for you today, Coach Gary. Those listening want to be great at the sport of running, want 2026 to be their breakthrough year. What's the final message for those people?
I think coming up with a plan and sticking with it. I think, I don't know if I get asked any question more, why the resurgence of American distance running, how did college get so good? But when you get done with the shoes well, there's more foreign athletes, everybody's older, blah, blah, blah. It's also, all this information that's out there, no excuse not to be, training effectively, but there's too much. There's 100 different ways to get where you want to get. And I think sometimes I see people that don't stick with it long enough and switch things up or try to incorporate 11 things. If I'm having a conversation with Colin Eckerman now, if you think that he's going to listen to this, Colin's got all of his ideas are fantastic. The problem is there's 197 things that he wants to put into this recipe, and you won't be able to taste anything, even if they all are, tasty on their own. So sometimes, perfection isn't attained by adding more. Perfection's attained once you get done pulling things away. And I think that's what I see some high schoolers going to. And I think the other thing is don't forget to compete. There really is an event every single weekend now. And it's better than when it used to be. If you wanted to run a 5K and go to the national meet, you had to go to Washington. If you missed that, you were dead in the water, or you had better been an absolute stud. And that was tough. And sometimes it wasn't fair, but you did get used to getting ready for one specific day, which is what track and cross country is really about. On the flip side now, geez, you could qualify for the national meet at 6 different meets every single weekend. And I think people don't take care of precious opportunities like that. And honing in on a given day, you gotta be fast enough to do it for sure. But boy, that might be the number one thing in running, or that you're rewarded with. I'm glad that 2 of my very, very best U.S. championships were at the Olympic trials. So being ready on the right day is huge. And I think sometimes that gets lost a little bit with all these races, all these chances. If you had asked me what a rabbit was in high school, heck, I didn't know until my junior or senior year. I was just told, all these guys kicking your ass is the rabbit. Just go ahead, But now we got guys running 15 minutes for 5K asking me who the rabbit's going to be. So, not everything's set up. Sooner or later, this sport is real, real simple, trying to beat someone next to you.
Coach Gary, I know you've listened to the podcast before. I have no clue why you'd listen to someone as dumb and unqualified as me as often as you do, but I'm blessed and privileged to make it to your earwaves. So I'm sure you've heard this question. The final question I ask every guest, every single podcast: if you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him?
Oh my God! I thought I was going to get Christmas movie and song was the last.
We'll do both. We'll do both. We can do both.
I would not cook anything, but in the spirit of Columbus, Ohio, we'd probably go out, and in Columbus, Ohio, I would probably start with a drink at Char Bar. which you might be too young to know of, but they have tremendous Long Island iced teas there. It was a first stop and sometimes a last stop. I would probably go to Hyde Park because I love the steak, eat the steak shop right outside. And if I was really hungry, I'd probably go Late Night Hound Dogs, which is another pizza place that I don't know if you know of, but it's kind of a hidden gem in Columbus. So I do that. And as far as my movie goes, it would be Chevy Chase, Christmas Vacation. I think that's an obvious one. I don't know how anyone would pick anything, besides that. And I was trying to think of a Christmas song. And I was trying to think of that song where all the famous artists came together. This is probably 30 years before you were born, 50 years maybe. But Do They Know It's Christmas Time? I just thought that continues to be like make me emotional just thinking about all of these stars coming together for a common cause. It was to kind of deal with the Ethiopian famine. But every single star showed up. None of them, I've watched a making of it. And it was just every time I hear that around Christmas time, it's a very moving song or whatever. So sorry about the meal, but.
I think my dad's talked about. I think I've heard that song once or twice before.
Yeah, Do They Know It's Christmas Time? Yeah. It was an incredible endeavor.
Do you know what year it came out? Let me look this up.
Oh my God, this is like 1985 or something.
Christmas Time release year. Let's see. Came out December 10, 1984. Right on.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Oh, that was
close. My dad would have been 17. That's why.
There you go.
Because I think he's played it for me before.
Age. Okay.
So. Anyways, Coach Gary, thanks for the time, attention, wisdom. It's been an honor and privilege learning from you, and excited to continue to follow along the success you have with the Furman program.
All right, great. Thanks for having me.